Say it. Say you belong to me. Derek's hand was already around Lena's throat before she could breathe. Not squeezing, just holding. The way a man holds something he believes is already his. The champagne glass shattered on the marble floor. Her back hit the cold wall of the hotel corridor. 20 feet away, behind those grand ballroom doors, Chicago's elite laughed and clinked glasses and heard nothing. I saw you look at him. Derek's whisper was worse than screaming. You think I don't see everything you do? She couldn't answer, couldn't move. But inside, something finally snapped, and Lena Marlowe made the most dangerous decision of her life. If this story sounds like something out of a movie, I promise you it was so much worse and so much more real. Subscribe to our channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story has traveled. Lena Marlowe had learned a long time ago how to make herself small. Not physically, she was 5'6" with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes the color of a winter lake, but in every other way that counted. She had learned to lower her voice before Derek raised his. She had learned to read the exact pitch of his footsteps on the hardwood floor and know from 20 feet away whether she was in for a normal evening or one she'd spend pressing ice against her skin in the bathroom with the door locked. She had learned the geometry of survival. But the night of the Hargrove Charity Gala, something in her was already cracked. Had been cracking slowly for months, like a wall that looks perfectly solid right up until it doesn't. She had spent 40 minutes in front of her mirror that evening, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she had looked at herself, really looked and thought, I don't recognize you anymore. The black gown Derek had chosen for her fit perfectly. Of course it did. He had a talent for surfaces. You look acceptable, he'd told her, straightening his cufflinks in the reflection behind her. Not beautiful, not stunning, acceptable. Like she was a presentation he'd prepared and wasn't entirely embarrassed by. She had smiled. She had learned to smile. The Hargrove Gala was held every year at the Meridian Hotel, 47th floor, a room that seemed to exist outside the normal laws of gravity, all glass and candlelight, and the quiet, expensive murmur of people who had never once worried about their electricity bill. Derek moved through the room like he owned it. He didn't, but that had never stopped him from behaving like he did. He was handsome Derek Walsh. That was the cruelest part. Square jaw, easy smile, the kind of confident stride that made people assume he was someone worth knowing. He was a commercial real estate developer, successful, polished, utterly charming when the occasion called for it. At parties, he laughed loudly and remembered everyone's names and made the women blush and the men feel interesting. And when they got home, he became someone else entirely. Lena had a bruise on her left forearm that night, pressed beneath the long sleeve of her gown. She told herself it wasn't that bad. She'd been telling herself that for 2 years. Stay close, Derek said under his breath as they moved through the crowd, his hand a firm proprietary pressure at the small of her back. Not romantic. Territorial. I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly. No, he agreed, you're not. She spent the first hour doing exactly what was expected of her. She laughed at the right moments. She deferred to Derek in conversation with practiced grace. She accepted a glass of champagne and barely touched it. She was in every visible way the perfect partner, the kind of woman that made people think, God, he's lucky. It was sometime after 9 that she excused herself to use the restroom. She didn't go to the restroom. She moved along the edge of the room, glass in hand, just needing 20 feet of space to breathe air that didn't have Derek in it. The music was something classical and low strings, she thought, though she couldn't have named the piece. She found a quieter alcove near one of the massive windows where the lights of Chicago stretched out below like something poured from a jar. And she stood there and she exhaled. And that was when she saw him. She almost didn't. He wasn't performing for the room the way Derek always did. He wasn't circling, working the crowd, shaking hands. He was simply standing near the far end of the room, slightly apart from the nearest group of guests, with a glass of something dark held loosely at his side, and he was watching. Not her. Everything. Victor Salvatore was 61 years old and looked exactly like a man who had never once in his life been told what to do. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with silver hair that had probably been black not so long ago, and a face that was all sharp edges and careful stillness. He wore his tuxedo the way some men wore armor, not like it had been chosen for him, but like he had simply decided it was appropriate, And that was the end of the conversation. Lena had heard his name before. Everyone who moved in Chicago's upper social circles had. Victor Salvatore, businessman, philanthropist, rumored to be connected to things that people talked about only in very hushed tones. The kind of name that arrived in a room before the man did. She looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then she heard Derek's voice behind her. "There you are." She turned. Derek was crossing the alcove toward her, and she knew immediately from the set of his jaw, from the particular flatness in his eyes, that someone had said something to him that he hadn't liked, and that she was about to become the place he put it. "I've been looking for you for 15 minutes, he said. "I just stepped away for some air." "I don't care what you stepped away for." He reached her and took her arm, not her hand, her arm, fingers wrapping around just below the elbow, right over the bruise. She didn't make a sound. She had learned not to. "We are at an event. You do not disappear at events." "Derek, do not." His voice dropped to something quiet and absolute. "Do not do that thing where you try to explain yourself in public. We will discuss this in the car." And something inside Lena, that cracked thing, that wall that had been failing for months, gave way. Not all at once, not loudly. It was the quietest possible collapse. She thought, "I cannot get in that car with him." She thought, "If I get in that car with him tonight, something is going to break that cannot be fixed." And then she stopped thinking entirely and started moving. She pulled free of Derek's grip, not dramatically, just a step sideways, just enough to put 6 inches between her arm and his hand. His eyes went sharp with surprise. In 2 years, she had never pulled away from him in public. She had never pulled away from him at all. "Lena, one moment," she said, and her voice was so steady it surprised her. "There's someone I need to speak to." She turned and walked. Her heels were quiet on the polished floor. Her heart was doing something enormous and terrified in her chest. But her stride was even, and she did not look back, because she knew that if she looked back, she would stop. She crossed the room toward Victor Salvatore. She had no plan. That was the honest truth of it. There was no calculation, no strategy. There was only the certainty that she could not turn around, and the knowledge that a man like Victor Salvatore was perhaps the only presence in this room that Derek Walsh would not simply walk through. Victor saw her coming. She could tell because his attention shifted to her, not with surprise, but with a kind of precise focus, the way a man like him probably looked at most things, with complete attention and no particular expression. She stopped in front of him, closer than strangers stood. "I need you to do something for me," she said. Her voice was quiet enough that only he could hear. His eyes, dark gray, she realized almost charcoal, moved over her face. Not in the way Derek's did, which was always cataloging, always looking for something to correct. This was different, more like reading. "Do you?" he said, not a question exactly, more like an acknowledgement that she had spoken. "My ex, the man I came here with, is walking toward us right now." She didn't look. She could feel it. "He's going to try to take my arm again. And when he does, I need him to believe that I'm with you." There was a silence that lasted approximately 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Lena became acutely aware of several things simultaneously: that she had just approached a man she did not know at a public event and said something that sounded out of context, completely insane; that she could hear Derek's footsteps behind her. Now she knew those footsteps. That Victor Salvatore had not moved, had not stepped back, had not shown a single flicker of what he thought about any of this. "Salvatore," someone said nearby, trying to pull his attention. Victor didn't look away from Lena. He said, which wasn't a word so much as a sound low in his chest, and then he did something she did not expect. He reached out and took her free hand in his, not grabbing, not possessive, just took it, like it was a decision he'd made and had no further interest in revisiting. His hand was large and warm and utterly unhurried. Derek arrived. "Lena!" His voice had the particular texture it got when he was furious, but couldn't afford to show it. Silk over granite. "Who is this?" She turned to look at Derek then, and for the first time in a very long time, she looked at him without the filter of fear, because there was something behind her now, or rather beside her, that changed the equation. That changed it completely. "This is Victor," she said. Derek's eyes moved to Victor, and something happened in Derek's face that Lena had never seen before. He hesitated. "Victor Salvatore," Victor said, and his voice was the voice of a man who had never once needed to speak loudly to be heard. He looked at Derek with the same measuring attention he'd given everything else, and he didn't smile, and he didn't extend his hand, and somehow the fact that he did neither of those things was more powerful than anything he might have done. Derek blinked, just once. I know the name. Most people do, Victor said, and looked back at Lena. Derek said, Lena, we should... She's not available, Victor said, not rudely, not with any particular edge. Just as a fact, the way you might mention the weather. She's not available, as though it had always been true and Derek had simply overlooked it. Derek's jaw tightened. Lena watched the calculation move across his face. She knew that face better than she knew her own, watched him weigh the fury against the public setting, against the name, against something in Victor Salvatore's absolute stillness that clearly communicated without a single word of threat that this was not a man who would be moved. Fine, Derek said at last, one syllable, a whole world of contained violence in it. We'll discuss this later. I don't think so, Lena said. Derek looked at her, then really looked at her, and she saw it, the shock. Not rage, not yet, though that was coming. Shock. Because in 2 years she had never said anything like that. She had never spoken to him that way at all. He walked away. The room continued around them, oblivious, full of music and champagne and the gentle performance of the very wealthy at play. Nobody had seen anything, or if they had decided it was someone else's drama and moved on. Lena exhaled. The sound came out of her small and unsteady. Victor did not release her hand. Thank you, she said. She was looking somewhere to the left of his shoulder because she wasn't sure she could look at his face yet. I know I didn't explain, Marlowe, Victor said. She blinked, looked at him. What? Your name is Marlowe. It wasn't a question. You work at Alderman Press. You've been with Walsh for 2 years. He paused. You've had 3 different appointments at Mercy General in the past 14 months. The bottom dropped out of her. I know most things that happen in this city, he said, simply, without apology. Walsh has a reputation, not a good one. Lena felt something move through her that she couldn't immediately name. It wasn't quite relief, and it wasn't quite fear. It was the disorienting sensation of being known by a stranger. You know who I am, she said slowly. I know who you are. She studied him, the gray eyes, the complete, unhurried stillness. Why didn't you say something, she asked. If you knew. It wasn't my business, he said, until you made it my business. There was a pause. I need to leave, Lena said. I can't. I drove here with him. My things are... She pressed her free hand against her temple. The practical complications were arriving now, crashing into each other. Her coat, her phone charger at his apartment. 2 years of her life tangled up in the logistics of a man she was terrified of. You're not going anywhere with Walsh tonight, Victor said. I don't have... My car is downstairs, he said. Where do you need to go? She stared at him. Why would you do that? He considered her question with the gravity it apparently deserved. Because he said, you asked me for something. I don't do things part way. That should have scared her. It did scare her a little. There was something enormous and unreadable about this man, something that operated on a frequency she didn't quite have the equipment to parse. But there was also something else, something she recognized from the part of herself that remembered what safety felt like back before Derek had taught her to confuse it with quiet. Victor Salvatore, standing in a room full of Chicago's most powerful people, with her hand in his, made her feel like the walls were solid. Okay, she said. He nodded once, like that settled it. They were moving toward the exit, her hand still in his, though looser now, more like an offered arm than a held hand, when she heard Derek's voice cut through the room behind her. You think this is over? She didn't stop walking, but she felt her spine tighten. Victor stopped. He turned slowly and looked at Derek across 15 feet of polished floor. Several people nearby went very still in the particular way people went still when they sensed something that their bodies understood before their minds did. Derek had made a mistake. Lena could see it register in real time on his face the way Victor Salvatore turned and looked at him with no anger, no defensiveness, not even interest really, just the flat, patient attention of a man who had never in his life needed to raise his voice because the people around him had always known at a cellular level to take him seriously. Are you speaking to me? Victor asked. Derek swallowed. Walk away, Victor said, still calm, still quiet. This is the only time I'll say it. Someone nearby coughed. A glass clinked somewhere across the room. Derek Walsh, who had made Lena Marlowe's life a 2-year nightmare of fear and control, and carefully applied pain, who had never once in her presence backed down from anything, because he had never once had a reason to. Derek Walsh turned and walked away. Lena watched him go. Something in her chest cracked open. Not in a bad way, in the way that a window cracks open after a long winter. Just a sliver of air, just the first cold, clean breath of something new. She didn't cry, not there. She would cry later a lot in the weeks ahead for a lot of different reasons. But right then, in the ballroom of the Meridian Hotel on the 47th floor, with the lights of Chicago spread out below them and a man she barely knew standing quietly beside her, she just breathed. "Come," Victor said, and she went. The elevator was quiet and fast and smelled faintly of cedar and something darker, warmer that she suspected was him. Victor stood with his hands loose at his sides, watching the floor numbers descend. A man with a phone appeared in the elevator at the 14th floor, looked up, and immediately looked back down at his phone with the intense focus of someone who had decided they were very busy. "Where am I taking you?" Victor asked. "I don't—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. The honest answer was that she didn't know. She couldn't go back to Derek's apartment. Her own apartment, the one she'd given up 18 months ago because Derek had a place, because it was easier, because that's how these things went, was gone. She had a friend in Wicker Park, maybe. A sister in Phoenix she hadn't spoken to properly in almost a year. "I don't have a place to go tonight," she said. It was hard to say, the hardest sentence of the evening so far. Victor was quiet for a moment. "I have a house in Lincoln Park," he said. 14 rooms. You can have one." She looked at him. "I don't know you." "No," he agreed. She stopped. She was going to say you're in the Mafia, but it seemed like the kind of thing you didn't just say even when it was clearly true. "I'm aware of what people say about me," Victor said. "It's not entirely inaccurate." "That's not reassuring." "I'm not trying to reassure you. I'm offering you a room. Whether you take it is your decision." The elevator opened into the lobby. Lena stood at the threshold for a moment, not quite in the lobby, not quite still in the elevator, and thought about the car with Derek and the bruise under her sleeve, and the way his voice had sounded when he said, "We'll discuss this later." She stepped forward. "Lincoln Park," she said. "Lincoln Park," Victor confirmed. His car was a black town car waiting exactly where he'd said it would be. A driver who didn't ask questions. A city sliding past the windows at 9:40 in the evening, all lit up and indifferent and vast. Lena sat with her hands in her lap and stared at the river as they crossed it. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "When I walked up to you tonight," she paused. "Why did you do it? You could have just looked at me like I was crazy and walked away." Victor was quiet for a moment. "You weren't crazy," he said. "That's not an answer." "No," he said. "I suppose it isn't." He looked out his own window at the passing city. "I've seen what men like Walsh do to people. I've known it my whole life." A pause. "I chose a long time ago that there are certain things I don't walk past." The car moved through a quiet residential street. Old trees, brownstones with lit windows. "You walked toward me," Lena said. "When I came to you, you had already taken a step toward me, before I'd said anything." Victor glanced at her, a brief thing. "I noticed that too," he said. Then the car stopped. The driver opened her door, and Lena Marlowe, 29 years old, exhausted and terrified, and more awake than she had been in 2 years, stepped out into the cold Chicago air and looked up at the house that Victor Salvatore had just offered her a room in. It was large, beautiful in a way that was more about structure than decoration. Iron gate, stone facade, windows that gave nothing away. Victor was beside her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "I know," Lena said. And then because it was true, "I'm afraid anyway." "That's fair," he said. He opened the gate, she walked through, and somewhere across the city in the Meridian Hotel ballroom, Derek Walsh was finishing his third whiskey and already planning what he was going to do next. Lena did not sleep that first night. She lay on top of the covers in a room that was larger than her first apartment, staring at a ceiling she couldn't see in the dark, listening to a house that made no sound at all. That was the strangest part. Derek's apartment had always had noise, the television he kept on too loud, his footsteps at 2 in the morning when he couldn't sleep and wanted to make sure she knew it. The particular creak of the third floorboard outside the bedroom door that she had learned to track the way sailors track the weather. Silence in her recent experience meant one of two things: either nothing was wrong or something was very wrong and she just hadn't found it yet. Here the silence felt different. It felt like it had weight, like it had been maintained deliberately by someone who understood its value. She thought about Derek. She couldn't help it. 2 years of conditioning didn't evaporate in one evening just because you'd walk through a different door. She thought about his face in the ballroom when Victor had turned and looked at him, that single terrible moment of hesitation that she had never once seen on Derek Walsh's face in all the time she'd known him. And she thought about what came after hesitation for a man like Derek. She thought about what he was doing right now, wherever he was. Her phone had 17 missed calls by the time she finally looked at it at 3 in the morning. She turned it face down on the nightstand and did not pick it up again. By the time gray light started coming in around the edges of the curtains, she had made exactly one decision: she was not going back. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know what living under Victor Salvatore's roof actually meant practically or otherwise. She didn't know how to untangle 2 years of her life from a man who still had her emergency credit card number memorized and knew the name of her mother's grave and would absolutely use both of those things as leverage if he decided it suited him. But she was not going back. That part was settled. She found the kitchen at 7 in the morning by following the smell of coffee. It was a large kitchen, all clean surfaces and quiet efficiency, and there was a woman in it, 50s, short gray hair, moving with the practiced economy of someone who had been running this household for a long time. She looked up when Lena appeared in the doorway. "Miss Marlowe," she said without surprise. "I'm Rosa. Coffee?" "Please," Lena said. "How did you know my name?" "Mr. Salvatore told me to expect you." Rosa poured coffee into a white cup and set it on the island with the ease of someone who had long ago stopped being curious about who appeared in her kitchen. "He also said to tell you that you're welcome to stay as long as you need and that there's no obligation attached to that." Lena wrapped both hands around the cup. "He said all that." "He said it very briefly," Rosa clarified, "but that was the meaning." Lena almost smiled. "Is he here?" "He left at 6. He usually does." Rosa opened a cabinet with the confidence of long familiarity. "He'll be back by 7 this evening, most likely. He said if you needed anything before then, I could help, and if it was something I couldn't handle, Marco would take you wherever you needed to go." "Marco?" "His driver. From last night." Rosa glanced at her. "He's trustworthy. Mr. Salvatore wouldn't have someone untrustworthy in that position." Lena nodded slowly. She was processing this, the infrastructure of it, the way this man had arranged the logistics of her comfort with the same quiet efficiency he apparently applied to everything else. It was strange. It was also, she realized, the first time in 2 years that anyone had arranged anything for her benefit without expecting something specific in return. She drank her coffee. Rosa made eggs without being asked, which Lena also ate without being asked because she was suddenly aware that she hadn't eaten since lunch the day before. "Rosa," she said when the plate was half empty, "has he done this before, brought someone here?" Rosa was quiet for a moment, wiping down a counter that was already clean. "He's had guests," she said carefully. "That's not what I asked." Rosa turned and looked at her with the kind of frank appraisal that only certain women of a certain age can deploy without it feeling rude. "No," she said. "Not like this." Lena's phone buzzed on the island where she'd set it. She looked down. Derek's name. She let it ring. It buzzed again 30 seconds later. Then again. Then a text message appeared. "We need to talk. This is insane. Call me back, Lena. I love you." She stared at it for a long time. Rosa, without a word, took Lena's empty plate and replaced it with a second cup of coffee. "Thank you," Lena said quietly. "Don't read it again," Rosa said, nodding at the phone. "Whatever it says, don't read it again today." It was good advice. Lena turned the phone face down. She spent the morning in the room they'd given her making a list. Not on her phone, she found a notepad in the nightstand drawer and a pen, and she wrote it out by hand the way she used to when she was in college and needed to think clearly. Things she needed to do, people she had to call, the shape of a life she had to reconstruct from whatever pieces were still recoverable. Her job was still there, she had confirmed that much on her way upstairs. A quick email to her editor at Alderman Press explaining a family emergency which was not entirely a lie. Her savings account had enough in it for 3 months of rent, somewhere modest, maybe 4, if she was careful, which she always was. She had a therapist she had stopped seeing 8 months ago because Derek had made the appointments difficult, and she had let him, and she was going to call that therapist today. She was building a list, and it was helping. Lists had always helped. The illusion of order, her college roommate used to call it, but Lena had never thought of it as an illusion. Order was the only thing that had gotten her through the last 2 years without completely coming apart. She was on item 11 when her phone rang again. Not Derek this time. An unknown number, Chicago area code. She almost didn't answer, but something made her, some instinct, some thread of a feeling she couldn't name. "Hello, Miss Marlowe." The voice was male, smooth, professionally pleasant in a way that immediately put her on alert. "My name is James Whitfield. I'm an attorney. I represent Derek Walsh." The pen stopped moving. "He's retained me to reach out to you this morning regarding—" "He called a lawyer," Lena said, "before 9 in the morning. Mr. Walsh is very motivated to resolve this situation quickly and—" "What situation?" Lena said. Her voice came out harder than she expected. "I left a party. I'm not aware of a situation." A brief pause. "There are some personal items of Mr. Walsh's that you may have in your possession." "I have nothing of Derek's," she said. "I left with nothing. I have the dress I was wearing, which he bought and which he is welcome to, and my phone. That's it. Miss Marlowe, Mr. Walsh is also concerned about—" "Tell him?" Lena said that I will be arranging to collect my belongings from his apartment at a time of my choosing with a witness present, and tell him not to call me again. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the notepad and breathed, counted to 10 the way her therapist had taught her, felt the trembling, slow and then stop. Derek had called a lawyer at 8:30 in the morning, which meant he hadn't slept either, which meant he was already in motion, already calculating, already looking for the angle that put him back in control of a situation that had slipped away from him. That was the thing about Derek Walsh that people who hadn't lived with him didn't understand. He wasn't just angry, he was strategic. The anger was real, but it was also a tool deployed when it was useful, packed away when it wasn't. What he could not tolerate, what genuinely destabilized him at a level beyond ego, was the feeling of losing. Not her specifically. Control. The story. The version of events where he was the wronged party. He would work on that story. She knew him well enough to know he was already working on it. She picked up the pen and added to her list, call a lawyer, her own one. Victor came home at 7:13 that evening. Lena heard the front door and then Rose's voice, and then his brief and low, and then footsteps unhurried, even the walk of a man who moved through his own house without announcing himself. She was in the sitting room off the main hallway, a book open in her lap that she had been comprehensively failing to read for the past hour. He appeared in the doorway. Still in the clothes he'd presumably worn all day. Dark suit, no tie, now collar open at the throat. He looked exactly as contained as he had the night before. Like the city and whatever he did in it had made no visible impression. "You're still here," he said. "You said I could be," Lena said. "I did." He came into the room, went to the sideboard, poured something dark into a glass. Didn't offer her one, which she appreciated. She'd had enough people making assumptions about what she wanted. "How was your day?" "Derek called a lawyer," she said. Victor turned and looked at her. "James Whitfield?" Her eyebrows went up. "You know him." "I know everyone Walsh would call in this situation." He came and sat, not beside her, but across in the chair opposite, settling into it with the ease of a man who owned it, which he did. What did Whitfield want? He said Derek was concerned about his personal items. It was a pretext. She paused. He's establishing a narrative, trying to get ahead of it. Victor studied her over his glass. "You know how he thinks." "I've had 2 years of advanced study," she said, and was surprised to hear the bitterness in her own voice, raw right at the surface. "What do you need?" Victor asked. "A lawyer, a real one." "Not—" She stopped, started again. "I don't have a lot of money right now. My accounts are technically separate, but Derek knows all my—" "I know a lawyer," Victor said. "I'm not going to let you pay for my lawyer." "I wasn't offering to pay," he said. "I was offering to make a call. She owes me a favor. She's very good." Lena looked at him steadily. "What kind of favor?" The ghost of something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. "The legal kind." She held his gaze for a moment. What do you want from me, Victor, in exchange for all of this? He didn't look away, didn't shift. Nothing, he said. People don't do things for nothing. Some people don't, he said. I told you last night, there are certain things I don't walk past. That's a principle, not an answer. It's both, he said, and then after a pause, you remind me of someone. She waited. He looked down at his glass. For the first time, she saw something move across his face that wasn't controlled. Something older than the room, older than the conversation. Someone I should have helped a long time ago, and didn't because it wasn't my business. He set the glass down. It's always your business, he said quietly. That's what I learned. The room was very quiet. Who was she, Lena asked. His eyes came back to her, dark gray measured. My sister, he said. That landed in the silence between them and stayed there. Lena said nothing for a long moment. Then I'm sorry. So am I, he said. And then like a door closing, not unkindly, just firmly, he picked up his glass again, and the expression was gone. I'll call the lawyer tonight. Her name is Catherine Reyes. She'll contact you tomorrow morning. Lena nodded. She should have let it go there, but something wouldn't let her. Victor. She waited until he looked at her. Derek isn't going to stop. You know that. You saw him last night. That's not a man who accepts losing. No, Victor said. It isn't. So what happens next? He looked at her with that measuring attention, the one that made her feel simultaneously like she was being read, and like what he was reading was something worth taking seriously. What happens next, he said, is that you build something he can't touch, legally, financially, personally. He paused. And if he moves on you before that's in place, I'll know about it. How soon? Because I will know about it, he said simply, absolutely. The way he said most things, she believed him, which was strange because she had spent 2 years learning not to believe men when they said they would protect her. Derek had said it once in the beginning, and she had believed that too. But this was different. She couldn't have explained why precisely, except that Derek had always said, I'll protect you, with one eye on how it made him look. And Victor said, I will know about it the way he might state a fact about the weather. Without theater, without any apparent need for her to be grateful. She stood up, smoothed the front of the borrowed sweater Rosa had found for her that morning. Good night, she said. Good night, Miss Marlowe. She was at the door when he spoke again. Lena, she turned. Lock your phone, he said. Change the password tonight, and don't use the same one you've used for the last 2 years. She stared at him. He knows my passcode. He's had access to your phone for 2 years, Victor said. Assume he knows everything on it. The floor felt slightly less solid than it had a moment ago. She gripped the door frame. All right, she said. And sleep, he said. You didn't last night. She didn't ask how he knew. She was beginning to understand that asking how Victor Salvatore knew things was like asking how the river knew to run downhill. It was simply the nature of him. She went upstairs. She changed her passcode. She deleted Derek's contact, not his number, because she needed to know when he was calling, but his name, so the phone just showed digits. She called her therapist's answering service and left a message requesting the earliest available appointment. Then she lay down on top of the covers again in the dark, in the silence that had weight. Her phone lit up at 10:47, unknown number different from the lawyer's. A text message. No name. Just, you think he's protecting you. Ask him what happened to the last woman who lived in that house. Lena's blood went cold. She sat up. She read it again. She looked at the number. She didn't recognize it. It could have been anyone, Derek, one of Derek's people, someone Derek had paid to send it, designed specifically to do exactly what it was doing, which was making her feel the floor give way again just when she'd found her footing. It was probably that, almost certainly that. Derek dismantling her sense of safety from a distance, which was one of his most practiced skills. She set the phone down on the nightstand. She told herself it was a manipulation. She told herself she was not going to let Derek Walsh take this from her too. This thin, fragile new thing she was trying to build, this first night of real quiet she'd had in years. She told herself all of that. And then she lay back down and stared at the ceiling in the dark and thought about what the message had said and could not quite make herself stop. Ask him what happened to the last woman who lived in that house. Outside, the city moved and breathed and went about its complicated life. Somewhere across it, Derek Walsh was awake and plotting, methodical and furious and nowhere near finished. And in the house in Lincoln Park, Lena Marlowe lay in the dark with a question she hadn't asked yet, growing louder by the minute. She asked him at breakfast. She had spent the night turning it over, examining it from every angle, the way you examine something you're afraid might cut you. And by 6 in the morning, Ipad decided that not asking was worse than asking. Not knowing was Derek's weapon. He had always preferred her in the dark, kept her there deliberately, strategically, because a woman who doesn't have the full picture is a woman who can't trust her own judgment. Lena had spent 2 years doubting herself inside that darkness. She was done with it. Victor was at the kitchen table with coffee and a newspaper. An actual printed newspaper which somehow surprised her less than it should have when she came downstairs at 7. He looked up. He did not say good morning with the particular brightness that people use when they're performing normalcy. He just looked up the way he looked at most things, with attention and without theater. There was a message on my phone last night, she said, sitting down across from him. No preamble. From an unknown number. It said, and I'm going to say this exactly as it was written, ask him what happened to the last woman who lived in that house. Victor set down the newspaper. The kitchen was very quiet. You think it was Walsh? He said, not a question. I think it was either Derek or someone Derek paid, she said, but I also think I need to ask you directly. Then ask me directly. She met his eyes. Was there a woman who lived here before me and did something happen to her? Victor was quiet for a moment that lasted long enough that she felt her pulse in her fingertips. Yes, he said. There was a woman. Lena's hands flat on the table pressed down slightly. Her name was Diane Mercer, Victor said. She was here for 4 months 3 years ago. She was running from her husband who was connected to a business associate of mine. He paused. She left, alive, healthy, and with enough of a financial settlement to start over in Seattle, which is what she wanted. She has a small business there now. Flowers, I believe. Lena looked at him. That's it. That's it. Then how does Derek know about her? Victor picked up his coffee. He doesn't, he said. He knows there was a woman here. That's the kind of thing people talk about in certain circles. He doesn't know the details. So he sent you a thread he could dress up as a question, knowing your imagination would do the rest of his work for him. She exhaled slowly. Something in her chest loosened, not completely, not yet, but enough. That's exactly what he does, she said quietly. He gives you half a thing and lets you build the worst version of it yourself. And then later he says you're paranoid, you are dramatic, you always assume the worst. Victor's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did, sharpened. He's been doing that a long time. 2 years, she said. Before that, he was just charming. They usually are, Victor said. She looked at him. You sound like you've seen this before. I've seen most things, he said. He picked up the newspaper again, then set it back down, which for Victor Salvatore apparently constituted a significant change of direction. Catherine Reyes will call you at 9. She's very good and she's not sentimental. Tell her everything. Don't protect him out of habit. I won't. People do, he said, out of habit, even when they know better. I know, she said. I've been doing it for 2 years. Catherine Reyes called at 8:58, which told Lena immediately that Victor had described her accurately. She was brisk without being cold, precise without being clinical, and within 20 minutes of conversation, she had extracted more useful information from Lena than Lena had managed to organize in her entire morning of list-making. Do you have documentation of any of the incidents? Catherine asked. Some, Lena said. I have photographs I took. I kept them in a cloud account he didn't know about. And 3 of the hospital visits there were records. A brief pause. Smart, Catherine said, and the word landed without condescension, just as a fact. Send me the cloud account details today. Don't access it from any device he's ever touched. He's never touched my laptop. He always said it was a piece of junk. She paused. He said that about most of my things. People like Walsh have a talent for making the things their partners value feel worthless, Catherine said. It's a method. Don't internalize it retroactively. Another pause. I'm going to file for a protective order today. It may not be granted immediately, but the filing itself creates a paper trail. Walsh's lawyer will receive notice, which means Walsh will know by end of day that you are not sitting quietly waiting for him to reestablish contact. He'll be furious, Lena said. Yes, Catherine said, he will. And that fury will look exactly like what it is in front of a judge. Let him be furious, Miss Marlowe. It helps us. After she hung up, Lena sat for a moment with her phone in her hand and felt something she hadn't felt in so long she almost didn't recognize it. Agency, the sensation of being in motion, not running from something, but moving towards something. Actually building, actually acting, actually in the driver's seat of her own life for the first time in longer than she wanted to count. It lasted approximately 40 minutes. Then Marco knocked on the sitting room door and said with his characteristic economy of expression, "Miss Marlowe, there's a man outside the gate." She was on her feet before she'd consciously decided to stand. "Derek." "No." Marco's face was steady, unreadable. "He says his name is Paul Whitman. Says he's a journalist." She went cold in a different way. Derek had called a journalist. Of course he had. Of course. The narrative she had known, he was building it. She had known it from the moment she'd seen his face in the ballroom. And here it was arriving faster than she'd expected. "Don't open the gate," she said. "It's not open," Marco said. "Mr. Salvatore's property. Nothing opens without his word or yours." She took a breath. "What does he want?" "He says he's doing a story on Victor Salvatore and wants to ask you some questions." Marco paused. "He said he's from the Tribune?" Lena pressed her fingers against her temple. Think, Derek had fed something to a journalist, something about her, about Victor, designed to reframe last night's events before she had a chance to control the story herself. Victor's reputation made it easy. All Derek had to do was suggest the right combination of words. Vulnerable woman, powerful criminal, fled the gala together, and the implication built itself. "Tell him I have no comment," she said, "and get the journalist's name and outlet and send it to Catherine Reyes." Marco nodded and left. She called Catherine back immediately. "He's faster than I expected," Catherine said when Lena had explained. She didn't sound particularly alarmed. "This is actually useful. If Walsh fed a story to the press less than 24 hours after you left, that's documented harassment. I want the journalist's name." Marco's getting it. "Good. And Lena, don't talk to anyone from any press outlet. Not to deny anything, not to clarify anything, not a word." "Understood." "Also," Catherine said, and her voice shifted slightly, just a degree towards something more direct. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Are you in a romantic relationship with Victor Salvatore?" Lena blinked. "No, I met him 3 days ago." "That's what I thought. But Walsh's lawyer is going to try to construct one because it reframes your departure from the gala as something other than you leaving an abusive partner. It becomes a woman running to another man, which in the court of public opinion is a very different story." "I know," Lena said. "Derek understands optics. He's always been very good at optics." "So are we," Catherine said. "Don't worry about the story. Worry about your documentation. Send me that cloud account today." She sent it that afternoon. Sitting on the edge of the bed in the room that was hers for now, she opened her laptop, the piece of junk Derek had never touched, and forwarded the cloud account credentials to Catherine's encrypted email. She did not open the folder of photographs herself. She had taken those pictures in bathrooms and in the car, and once in a supply closet at work, always quickly, always secretly, always with the specific numb efficiency of someone doing something that needed to be done before they let themselves feel what it meant. She was not ready to look at them again. She didn't need to be. That's what Catherine was for. Her phone rang at 4 in the afternoon, Derek's number. She let it ring. It rang again at 4:15. At 4:20, a text, "Lena, I know you're scared and I understand, but you need to hear my side of this. What you're doing right now is going to ruin both of us. Please call me back." She showed it to Catherine via screenshot. "Perfect," Catherine said. "Keep them all." At 6:15, Victor came home. She heard the front door, then Rose's voice, then a silence that stretched a beat longer than usual. Then footsteps, but not alone. 2 sets. She was in the hallway when Victor appeared, and beside him, moving with the compact, coiled energy of a man who existed primarily in a state of controlled forward motion, was someone she had never seen before. Younger than Victor by perhaps 15 years. Dark-eyed, sharp-featured, with the kind of watchful stillness that suggested he had learned it from Victor himself, or from somewhere that produced the same result. "Lena," Victor said, "this is Nico. He works with me." Nico looked at her with the frank appraisal of someone who had been briefed and was now updating the briefing against the reality. "Miss Marlowe," he said, neutral. "Professional." "There's been a development," Victor said, And his voice had a quality she hadn't heard before, not harder exactly, but more precise, the way a surgeon's voice goes when something in the operating room requires immediate attention. "The journalist," she said. "Not just a journalist," Victor said. They moved into the sitting room. Walsh spoke to Paul Whitman, yes, but Whitman isn't doing a story about you and me. He's doing a story about me, specifically one that Walsh has been feeding material for. Not new material. He paused. Old material. Nico crossed his arms. Someone's been building a file on Mr. Salvatore for months. Walsh didn't originate it. He just found it or was introduced to it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. "Someone was already building a case against you," Lena said slowly, "before I ever walked up to you at the gala." "Before last weekend, yes," Victor said. "And Derek found it. Or was pointed toward it," Nico said, "which is a different thing." "Who pointed him?" Lena asked. The two men exchanged a look, brief, weighted, communicating something she was only half able to read. "That," Victor said, "is what we're working on." She looked at him. "This is bigger than Derek." "Walsh is a piece of it," Victor said. "He's useful to someone, whether he knows that or not is another question." The implications of it should arrange themselves in Lena's mind with a cold, clear precision. Derek, who was calculating but not sophisticated, who was dangerous but essentially small-scale, who operated in the world of commercial real estate and personal cruelty, had somehow become connected to something that was operating on Victor Salvatore's level. Either he was smarter than she'd given him credit for, or he had stumbled into something and was being used by it, or both. "Victor," she said carefully, "is this my fault? Did bringing me here?" "No," he said, immediately, without deliberation. "This existed before you walked into that ballroom. You didn't create this. But I may have accelerated it." He was quiet for a moment. Then, possibly, Walsh having a personal grievance gave whoever this is a more motivated participant. But the architecture was already there. She sat down. The sitting room chair felt suddenly less stable than it had that morning. "What do I do?" she asked. "Nothing different," Victor said. "Keep working with Catherine. Stay out of the press. Let me work on the other side of this." "I don't want to be something that's happening to you," she said. "I came to you for help, not to bring more trouble into your house." Something shifted in his expression. "You didn't bring trouble," he said. "Trouble was already here. You are not—" He stopped, reconsidered the sentence. "You are not collateral in this, Lena. You're not a liability. Don't start thinking of yourself that way." Nico, who had been standing to the side with the deliberate unobtrusiveness of someone very good at reading a room, quietly excused himself. The room was quieter without him. "Your sister," Lena said. She hadn't planned to say it. It arrived on its own from the place in her brain that connected things she hadn't consciously assembled yet. Victor looked at her. "The man who hurt her," she said. "Was he ever held accountable?" A long pause. "No," Victor said. "He wasn't." "Is that why you do this? The women you've helped, Diane, now me." "I don't keep a tally," he said. "That's not what I asked." He met her eyes. "Yes," he said. "Partly. It doesn't fix what happened. Nothing fixes what happened. But it does something." He paused. "It does enough." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who ran half of Chicago's underground and made newspapers nervous and came home at 7 in the evening and had a woman who made eggs without being asked, and a driver who didn't ask questions, in a house that was too large for one person, and who had a sister he hadn't been able to help and had never stopped paying that debt. "Thank you," she said, "for being honest." "I generally am," he said. "It's more efficient." She almost laughed. It surprised her, the almost laugh. She hadn't been close to laughing in longer than she could clearly remember. Her phone buzzed on the side table. She glanced at it automatically. Not Derek. A number she didn't recognize, different from the lawyer, different from the journalist, different from the unknown number that had sent her the message about the last woman in the house. She picked it up. A text message. 6 words. She read it once, then again. She looked up at Victor. "It says," she said slowly, "that Derek knows where my sister lives." Victor was across the room before she finished the sentence. He took the phone, read it, his face absolutely still, in the way that she was beginning to understand meant the opposite of calm, meant that something very large and very controlled was happening beneath the surface. He handed the phone back. Rosa, he said toward the hallway without raising his voice. Rosa appeared in the doorway within seconds as though she had been nearby, and waiting, which she probably had. Call Nico back, Victor said, and tell Marco to bring the car around. Rosa disappeared. Lena stood up. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure your sister is safe, he said. Tonight, right now. She's in Phoenix. She doesn't even know what's happening. She will in about 10 minutes, Victor said. I have someone there. They'll go to her address, they'll watch it, and nothing will happen to her. He was already moving. Do you want to call her yourself, or do you want me to have my contact reach out first? Oh, no. I'll call her, Lena said immediately. She doesn't know you. She'll panic. Call her now, Victor said. Tell her to expect the visitor. Tell her the visitor is there to help and will identify himself as... He paused for half a second. As a friend of Rosa's, she'll understand that context later. Lena was already dialing. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her jaw. Her sister picked up on the second ring. Lena, oh my God, I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. What is going on? Someone called me asking about... Claire. Lena kept her voice even, steady, the way she had learned to keep things steady even when they weren't. Listen to me carefully. I need you to go inside your house right now, lock the doors, and I'm going to explain everything. There is someone coming to your address who is there to help. His name, he'll say he's a friend of Rosa's. He's safe. Do you hear me? A pause. Lena, you're scaring me. I know, I'm sorry. Go inside right now while I talk to you. Are you inside? Yes, I'm inside. Lena, what happened? Victor was in the hallway. He caught her eye and held up 2 fingers 2 minutes, and she nodded. I left Derek, she said. Silence on the line. Oh, thank God, her sister breathed. And then, with the particular anguish of someone who had been holding something for a very long time, oh, Lena, oh, finally, are you safe? I'm safe, Lena said. And the word felt true in a way it hadn't in years. Not complete, not yet, but true in its most essential form. I'm safe and I'm going to tell you everything. But right now I need you to stay inside and wait for the man who's coming. Okay, Claire said. Okay, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Lena exhaled. Outside, she could hear Marco starting the car. And somewhere in the city, in an office, in an apartment, in whatever space Derek Walsh occupied, when he was building his next move, something had just shifted. He had reached for her sister. He had reached past her, through her, toward the people she loved, which meant that whatever calculation he had been making about her threshold, about how much it would take to make her fold, he had just recalculated upward. He had decided to make her afraid for someone else. What he had not accounted for, what he could not have fully anticipated because he had never had to operate at this level before, was that Lena was no longer making decisions alone in the dark. And Victor Salvatore was already in the car. Claire was safe by 9:15 that evening. Victor's contact in Phoenix, a man named Reyes, no relation to the lawyer, which Lena found darkly amusing, had reached her sister's address within 30 minutes of the call. Claire had described him afterward as looking like a very large accountant, which made Rosa laugh quietly from the kitchen doorway when Lena related. He had stayed outside through the night, visible enough to discourage, invisible enough not to frighten the neighbors. Lena had stayed on the phone with Claire for 2 hours. She had told her almost everything, not the parts about what Victor actually was, not the full architecture of it, because she wasn't sure she understood that architecture fully herself yet, and she didn't want to frighten her sister more than necessary. She told her about leaving the gala, about Derek's lawyer calling at 8:30 in the morning, about Catherine Reyes and the protective order filing and the photographs in the cloud account that she had taken in bathrooms with shaking hands and had never shown anyone until now. Claire had cried, Lena had not. She had used all her crying up the night before lying in the dark. She had spoken steadily and answered every question and let her sister be as devastated as she needed to be because Claire had known something was wrong for over a year and had been told gently and repeatedly by Lena herself that everything was fine, it was fine, Derek could be difficult, but it was fine. Carrying the weight of that particular lie while her sister sobbed was one of the harder things Lena had done in a week that contained a remarkable number of hard things. Why didn't you tell me? Claire kept saying. Not accusatory, just grief. Lena, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want it to be real, Lena said. If I told you it was real anyway. I know, she said. I know that now. When she finally hung up, it was nearly 10. The house was quiet. She found Victor in his study, a room she hadn't been in before the door opened him at his desk with reading glasses she hadn't known he wore and a stack of papers that he set face down when she appeared in the doorway. The reading glasses made him look slightly less like a man who could end a conversation by walking into it, which she suspected was not the impression he typically aimed for. She's all right, he asked. She's all right. Lena leaned against the doorframe. Victor, who is the person feeding information about you to Derek, do you know yet? He took the glasses off, set them on the desk. We have a candidate. Tell me. He looked at her for a moment. You understand that what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this house. I'm living in your house, she said. I think we're past the point where I would casually discuss your business with strangers. Something in his expression shifted that almost thing that wasn't quite a smile, but lived in the same neighborhood. His name is Frank Caruso, Victor said. He's been in my organization for 11 years. He manages a portion of our legitimate investments, commercial property primarily. Commercial property. The words landed with a specific weight. Derek's industry, Lena said. Derek's industry, Victor confirmed. They know each other. Not well, they've overlapped at events, shared mutual contacts. When Walsh lost you at the gala, when you walked toward me and he recognized my name, he made a call. Caruso was either the call or one step removed from it. Caruso wants to hurt you, Lena said. Caruso wants my position, Victor said. He's been patient about it. 11 years of patience. He paused. I should have seen it sooner. Why didn't you? The question came out more directly than she intended, but she didn't take it back. Victor was quiet for a moment. Because I trusted him, he said, insufficiently carefully. That's on me. He said it without self-pity, just as a fact he was accounting for. Walsh gave Caruso a new angle, a personal one, a distraction they could use to apply pressure while the larger operation moved. The newspaper story. The newspaper story is a tool, Victor said. The real pressure is elsewhere, financial, regulatory. There are 3 entities that have filed complaints with the city in the last 2 weeks involving properties connected to my organization. The timing is not coincidental. Lena absorbed this, the scale of it, the infrastructure. Derek, who she had thought of as a personal threat, real and dangerous and focused on her, was actually a small component in something much larger and much more organized. He had been handed a weapon in the form of access to her and had used it probably without fully understanding what he was actually a part of. He doesn't know about Caruso, does he, she said. Derek, he thinks he found this on his own. Almost certainly, Victor said. Walsh believes he's conducting a private war. He has no idea he's been recruited into one. She thought about Derek at his most confident, that particular set of his jaw, when he believed he had all the information and someone else didn't. He was operating right now in that mode, completely certain, completely wrong about the size of what he was inside. She felt something she didn't expect: pity. Brief, clean, and almost immediately displaced by the memory of his hand around her throat. But it was there for a moment, a flicker. What happens to Caruso? She asked. Victor looked at her steadily. That's being handled. I'm not asking for details, she said. I'm asking if it's going to be something that comes back on you. No, he said. It won't. Okay, she said. She trusted that. She had examined the fact that she trusted it and had decided the trust was based on evidence, not on wishful thinking. That was the difference between now and 2 years ago. She was not taking things on faith because someone had charmed her. She was making assessments. She pushed off the doorframe. Get some sleep, she said. You look tired. He blinked. She had the distinct impression that not many people told Victor Salvatore he looked tired. I'm fine, he said. You have reading glasses and a desk covered in papers at 10 o'clock at night, she said. You're tired. The papers will still be wrong tomorrow. The almost smile again, closer this time. Good night, Lena. Good night. She was halfway up the stairs when her phone buzzed. She looked at it on reflex. Derek. Not a call, a text. And the text was 4 words that stopped her on the staircase with one hand on the rail. I know you're there. She stood absolutely still. He knew she was at Victor's house. She had assumed he might suspect it. Where else would she have gone that night? But knowing and knowing were different things. The specificity of it. I know you're there. Not I assume, not I think, I know. She went back downstairs. Victor was still at his desk. He read the message when she held the phone out. His expression didn't change, but he picked up his own phone and sent a text she didn't see the contents of, quick and efficient. He's had someone watching the house, Victor said. Since when? Since last night, most likely. Maybe before. He set his phone down. It doesn't change anything materially. Marco knew, my security knew, but Walsh knowing where you are, that escalates his sense of control. He'll believe it gives him leverage. Does it? No, Victor said. It gives him the illusion of it, which is actually more dangerous because men who believe they have leverage tend to act on it. She sat down in the chair across from his desk. The chair she suspected was usually occupied by people who were there to report to him, which was a strange position to be in, and also somehow exactly right because she did not feel like a supplicant. She felt like someone at a table. Victor, I want to do something, she said. He waited. I want to go get my things from Derek's apartment, she said. Tomorrow, in the daytime. With Marco and with a witness, Catherine suggested a witness. I'll come, Victor said. She shook her head. I don't want you there. He looked up. I need to do this myself, she said. I need Derek to see me do it myself. If you're there, it becomes about you, about the threat of you, about what you represent. And I need him to see me standing in that apartment, not because I have someone powerful behind me, but because I've decided to. Do you understand what I'm saying? A pause, something moved in his face. Yes, he said quietly, I understand. Marco can drive me. Catherine will have someone meet me there, but I go in without backup that Derek can point to. All right, Victor said, but Marco will be at the door. Marco can be at the door, she agreed. She went back upstairs and lay in the dark and did not sleep for a long time. But it was a different kind of not sleeping than the nights before. She was not lying there being afraid. She was lying there thinking clearly, planning carefully, building the architecture of tomorrow in her mind, the way she used to build things before Derek had convinced her piece by piece that she wasn't capable of building anything. At 7 the next morning, she called Derek. He picked up before the first ring finished, which told her he'd been holding the phone. Lena, I'm coming to get my things today, she said. This afternoon, 2 o'clock, I will have a witness. I need 2 hours and then I'll be gone. Silence. She could hear him breathing, processing, recalculating. We need to talk, he said. His voice was doing the careful thing, the modulated, reasonable version. The one he used for business and for the early days when he was still showing her who he wanted her to believe he was. Just talk, Lena. We've been together for 2 years. You owe me a conversation. I owe you nothing, she said. The breathing on the other end changed. 2 o'clock, she said. If you're not there, Marco will collect my things in the presence of my witness and will leave. If you make any attempt to prevent my leaving, my attorney will file the additional documentation she's been holding. Do you understand? Additional documentation, Derek said, and his voice had dropped out of the reasonable register entirely. Just quiet now. Dangerous quiet. The kind she knew better than she knew most things. What documentation? Goodbye, Derek. She hung up. Her hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat on the bedspread and counted to 10, and the shaking slowed and then stopped. She was getting better at that, the stopping. The returning to herself. Marco drove her at 1:45. Catherine's colleague, a composed young woman named Priya, who carried a clipboard and had the energy of someone who had witnessed moving out scenarios before and found them professionally interesting, met them in the lobby of Derek's building. Derek was there when they arrived upstairs. Of course he was. He opened the door before she knocked, which meant he'd been watching through the peephole, which was such a Derek thing that she felt a cold, clarifying wave of recognition move through her. This is who he is. This has always been who he is. She had not been wrong or paranoid or dramatic. She had simply been right, and it had taken her too long to let herself be right. He looked terrible. She registered that was something more complicated than satisfaction. He was pale, slightly unshaven, wearing a shirt that wasn't pressed, which for Derek Walsh was the equivalent of anyone else appearing in public in pajamas. His eyes were bright with something that might have been lack of sleep or might have been the specific electricity of a man who had been running on anger for 3 days. You brought a lawyer, he said, looking at Priya. She's a witness, Lena said. Are you going to let us in? He stepped back. His jaw was very tight. She moved through the apartment with the specific efficiency of someone who has mentally pre-packed. She had spent 3 weeks here, no 2 years here. She corrected herself. 2 years of her life in these rooms, and she knew exactly where her things were. Her books, her laptop, the photographs from the shelf in the spare room that Derek had always said made the place look cluttered. Her grandmother's bracelet from the jewelry box in the bedroom, which she went to get herself while Priya stood in the hallway, and Derek followed Lena to the bedroom doorway and stood there watching with his arms crossed. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Probably I made several," she said, opening the jewelry box. There, the bracelet, small and silver and very old. She put it on her wrist. The biggest one was staying this long. "I love you," he said. She turned and looked at him. Full on. She hadn't looked at him like this without fear filtering everything since before she understood what he was. He was just a man, handsome and controlled, and fundamentally incapable of understanding that what he called love was something else entirely, something that had a different name, something that required other people to be smaller than themselves in order to survive. "No, you don't," she said. "You love what you thought I was. And I'm sorry I'm not her. I'm sorry that's disappointing. But I'm going to learn to live the rest of my life very loudly being not her, so I suggest you start adjusting." She picked up the box she'd packed and walked past him into the hallway. "Lena." His voice cracked slightly, just slightly. She kept walking. In the elevator, Priya stood beside her in professional silence. The doors closed. The elevator descended. 32 floors. "You did well," Priya said when the lobby appeared. "I thought I was going to be sick the whole time," Lena said. "You didn't look it," Priya said. "That's what matters to opposing counsel." They came out into the afternoon. Marco was at the curb. He took the box without being asked and put it in the trunk, and Lena stood for a moment on the sidewalk outside Derek Walsh's building with the winter air on her face and her grandmother's bracelet on her wrist, and felt something enormous and quiet settle in her chest. She had gone in. She had gotten her things. She had looked him in the eye and told him the truth and walked out. She was still standing. She was still herself. Marco held the car door open. She got in. They were 3 blocks away when her phone rang. "Catherine," she answered. "We have a problem," Catherine said, and her voice had lost its professional evenness for the first time since they'd met. "The Tribune piece, it's not running tomorrow. It ran this morning, online. It's already been picked up by 4 other outlets." Lena closed her eyes. "What does it say?" "It frames your leaving the gala as I'm going to read you the exact phrasing, a vulnerable woman's apparent relationship with known organized crime figure Victor Salvatore, sources close to Walsh family expressing concern for her welfare." Catherine paused. "Sources close to Walsh family. He made himself the worried ex-boyfriend." "Of course he did," Lena said. "There's more. The article includes a photograph." "Of what?" "Of you and Victor," Catherine said. "Leaving the Meridian together. His hand," she stopped. "His hand is on your back. It will read to people as intimate." Lena thought of that moment, Victor's hand at the small of her back as they moved toward the elevator. She remembered it as steadying, practical. A man ensuring they moved through a crowded room without losing each other. But a photograph removed context. A photograph gave you only what fit inside its frame. "He planned this from the beginning," Lena said. "The photographer was already there." "Someone positioned them," Catherine said. "Yes, this wasn't opportunistic. This was prepared." Caruso, the name arrived in her mind without effort. Victor had said Caruso managed legitimate investments, commercial property. He would have had access to event photographers. He would have known Victor would be at the gala. The whole thing, the whole architecture of it had been built before Lena had ever walked across that ballroom floor. She had not accidentally inserted herself into a trap. She had walked into one that had been set for someone else, and in doing so had become part of it. "Catherine Shum," she said carefully, "how bad is this for Victor?" A pause. "Reputationally, the article says nothing his opponents don't already assume. But combined with the regulatory filings and the financial pressure, it's designed to arrive at the same moment as those. Coordinated. Someone very organized is doing this." "I know who," Lena said. "What?" "I know who," she said again. "Get me in front of a journalist. Not the Tribune, someone else. Someone good. I want to give a statement." Silence on the line. "Lena, I advise against." "I know," Lena said. "I know you do. But I'm not going to sit in a house in Lincoln Park while Derek builds a story that makes me a victim and makes Victor a predator, when the truth is the exact opposite of both of those things. She paused. Catherine, I have 3 hospital records, 47 photographs, and 2 years of text messages that tell the actual story. Let's tell it. Another silence. Longer. Give me 2 hours, Catherine said. I know someone at the Sun-Times. She's good and she's fair, and she will not be manipulated. Set it up, Lena said. She hung up, looked out the window at the passing city. Marco's eyes appeared briefly in the rearview mirror. He said nothing, but she had the sense from his expression that he approved, which somehow mattered more to her than she expected. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number different from all the others, a new one, which meant Derek was cycling through devices or paying people to contact her, which meant his level of desperation was climbing faster than she'd realized. This one said only, "You have no idea what Victor has done. Ask him about Elena Vasquez." She stared at the name. Elena Vasquez. Not Diane Mercer. Not the woman from the house that Derek's first message had referenced. Someone different. A new name carefully chosen arrived at the precise moment she was feeling most grounded. Her pulse picked up. She made herself breathe. She was not going to spiral. She was not going to do Derek's work for him by constructing worst-case scenarios in her head from a name on a screen sent by someone who was paid to unsettle her. But she was going to ask Victor. Tonight, directly. With the same straightforward insistence she had used every other time she had needed the truth from him, and he had given it to her. She put the phone in her pocket. 2 hours to the Sun-Times interview. She needed to be sharp and clear and completely in control of her own story when she sat across from that journalist. She could fall apart later, or not at all. Both were options. The car moved through Chicago, the city indifferent and immense, and full of people who had no idea that somewhere in it a war was being conducted on several fronts simultaneously, and Lena Marlowe, who had spent 2 years making herself small, was done being collateral in anyone else's story. She was writing her own now, and it was not going to end the way Derek Walsh had planned. The Sun-Times journalist's name was Sandra Okafor, and she had the particular quality of stillness that Lena associated with people who had spent years listening to other people's worst moments without flinching. She was somewhere in her mid-40s with sharp eyes behind wire-frame glasses and a recorder she placed on the table between them with the practiced ease of someone who understood that the object itself could make people nervous, and who had decided a long time ago that nervous people didn't tell the truth as cleanly as comfortable ones. They met at Catherine's office. Neutral ground. Catherine sat to Lena's left and said almost nothing, which was its own form of presence. "Tell me what happened," Sandra said. "From the beginning, in your own words." Lena told her. She told her about the first year the charming version of Derek, the one that had made her believe she was lucky, chosen scene. She told her about the slow erosion of the second year, the way it happened in increments so small that each one seemed survivable, until you looked up one day and realized you had traveled an enormous distance from yourself without ever taking a single step you would have consciously agreed to. She told her about the hospital visits, 3 of them, presented as accidents, filed as accidents, because she had not yet found the courage to file them as what they were. She told her about the night of the gala and the hand on her arm over the bruise and the moment something inside her finally broke in the direction of forward instead of inward. She did not perform any of it. She did not cry, though her voice went tight in certain places, and she let it be tight instead of forcing it smooth the way she once would have. She spoke the way she had learned to speak in the last 5 days, directly, without protection, without the reflexive softening she had spent 2 years developing to keep Derek's temperature manageable. Sandra listened, wrote almost nothing, asked 3 questions, all of them precise, none of them leading. At the end, she said, "The Tribune piece frames your relationship with Victor Salvatore as the center of the story. Do you want to address that?" "Victor Salvatore offered me safety when I needed it," Lena said. "He asked for nothing in return. That is the complete and accurate description of our relationship." She paused. "The Tribune piece was fed by Derek Walsh, who is the same man whose hand is documented in 47 photographs in my attorney's possession. The framing of that piece tells you more about Derek's strategy than it does about my life." Sandra looked at her for a moment. Then she clicked off the recorder. Off the record, she said. Are you all right? Lena considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I'm becoming all right, she said, which is more honest than yes. Sandra nodded. The piece will run tomorrow, she said. Front page digital, likely above the full print. I'll fact-check everything tonight. She looked at Catherine. I'll need access to the documentation before midnight. You'll have it by 10, Catherine said. When Sandra left, Catherine turned to Lena and looked at her with the frank assessing gaze that Lena had come to understand was her version of warmth. You were very good in there, she said. I told the truth, Lena said. It shouldn't require being good at it. It always does, Catherine said. That's the injustice of it. Marco drove her back to Lincoln Park. It was past 7. The city was doing its evening things, shifting from the pace of work into the pace of living. Lights coming on in windows, the particular sound of traffic thinning at intersections. Lena sat in the back seat and felt the specific exhaustion of someone who has spent a day doing necessary things that cost something real. She had one more necessary thing left tonight. Victor was in the kitchen when she arrived. Not at his desk, not in the sitting room in the kitchen, which surprised her. He was talking to Rosa in the low, easy way of two people who had known each other a long time. And Rosa was laughing at something he'd said, and the ordinary humanness of it, this man who ran an empire laughing in his kitchen at 7 in the evening, was so unexpected that Lena stopped in the doorway for a second before either of them noticed her. Rosa excused herself with the tactful efficiency that was her signature. Victor turned. He read her face the way he read most things completely and without visible reaction. The interview went well, he said. It went honestly, she said, which I think is better. She sat down at the kitchen island. Victor, I need to ask you something. Yes, he said. Before she'd asked it, she looked at him. Elena Vasquez. The name landed in his kitchen and sat there. Victor's expression didn't shatter or shift the way a guilty person's expression moves. It went very still, but it was a different kind of still than his usual careful containment. It was the stillness of something that had weight in history and had not been spoken aloud in some time. Where did you hear that name? He asked. Anonymous text. Same pattern as the others, timed to arrive when I was feeling most stable, designed to destabilize. She kept her eyes on him. I told myself I would ask you directly. So I'm asking. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, sit with me. They moved to the sitting room. Victor sat across from her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he did not immediately begin speaking. He looked at the middle distance between them for a moment, and she watched him make a decision about something. Elena Vasquez was a woman I loved, he said, 12 years ago. Lena said nothing. Let it have space. She was a journalist, investigative. She was working on a piece about corruption in the city's construction licensing overlaps with my world, though the piece wasn't about me. She was warned off twice. He paused. The third warning is not a warning. The room was very quiet. She was killed, Lena said. Not a question. Yes. By someone in your organization. No, he said. The word was immediate and flat. By the people she was investigating, city officials, 2 of whom are no longer in their positions, one of whom is in federal prison for unrelated charges, because I spent 4 years making sure the right information reached the right federal investigators. He paused. It was the only legal avenue I had. I used it. Lena looked at him. And the people who sent me that name know this story. Caruso knows this story, Victor said. He knew Elena. He would know that her name sent to you at the right moment would create a specific fear that I have a history of women in my life being harmed. That proximity to me is dangerous. He paused. The irony is that the danger in Elena's case came from the people trying to destroy me, not from me, which is the same dynamic currently in play. They're using your grief as a weapon, Lena said quietly. He looked at her, then a full, unguarded look, the kind she had seen from him only rarely in the small hours of conversations that had gone somewhere real. Yes, he said, that's exactly what they're doing. She held his gaze. I'm sorry about Elena. 12 years ago, he said. 12 years doesn't make it smaller, she said. It just makes it older. Something in his face moved, the almost smile, but softer this time and sadder. No, he said, it doesn't. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it with the reflex she had developed over the past week, the constant low-grade alertness, the body's expectation of the next incoming thing. It was Catherine, a text protective order granted. Judge signed it an hour ago. Derek Walsh is legally prohibited from contacting you directly or through third parties approaching your residence place of work or your sister's address. Served to his attorney at 8:15 tonight. Lena read it twice. Then she set the phone down on the arm of the chair and did not pick it up again because she was afraid that if she moved, she would break something. Not something physical, but the particular crystalline quality of this moment. This exact configuration of relief and exhaustion and the strange, unfamiliar sensation of the ground being solid beneath her. The protective order went through, she said. Victor nodded once. He had probably known before she did. She sat with it for a moment. Then she said, "He's not going to honor it." "No," Victor said. "Men like Walsh don't honor paper. But the paper matters anyway because every violation is documented and documentation builds cases." "Caruso," she said. "What's happening there?" Victor was quiet for a moment. "Caruso made a significant financial error 3 days ago," he said. "He moved money he should not have moved in a way that created a paper trail he did not intend to create. The relevant federal agency became aware of this afternoon." Lena looked at him. "That error didn't happen by accident." "Most errors of that kind don't," Victor said. "You engineered it." "I created conditions," he said carefully, in which his own choices became visible. She understood. She didn't ask for more detail because she understood also that there were portions of Victor Salvatore's world that she could know the shape of without knowing the interior, and that this was probably the appropriate relationship to have with those portions. He had not asked her to enter that world. He had offered her shelter at its edge. "The Tribune journalist," she said. "Whitman, he published a story built on information Caruso provided. What happens to him? Journalists who publish inaccurate stories based on sources who turn out to be the subject of federal investigation tend to revisit their coverage," Victor said, proactively. She almost smiled. "You have a very particular way of describing things." "I find precision useful," he said. The night had settled fully around the house. Rosa had left a lamp on in the corner of the room, a small warm light that made the space feel contained and safe in the specific way of rooms where people have sat together long enough that the room itself has absorbed something of that. "Victor," Lena said, "I've been thinking about what comes next." "Tell me." "I'm going to find my own place," she said. "I've already started looking. Something small, Wicker Park maybe, or Pilsen. Somewhere that's mine." She paused. "I need that. I need a door that I chose and a set of keys that are only mine. Do you understand, Taya?" "Yes," he said, immediately, without any flicker of something that needed to be managed. Just yes. "I'm not leaving because I'm ungrateful," she said. "Or because I don't," she stopped. Chose the words. "Because this hasn't meant something." "It has. You gave me the first week of my adult life where I felt like the walls were solid. I'm not going to forget that." "You don't need to explain yourself," he said. "I want to," she said. "I spent 2 years not explaining myself because it was never safe to. I'm going to explain myself when I want to now, even when I don't have to." The almost smile arrived full this time. Not a ghost of it. The actual thing, and it changed his face in a way that made him look briefly, unexpectedly, like someone who had once been young and unguarded, and had simply been carrying the weight of not being those things for a very long time. "Fair enough," he said. She stood up. He stood out of the particular courtesy that she had observed was simply part of him not performed for anyone. "Can I ask you one more thing?" she said. "Yes." "At the gala," she said, "when I walked towards you, you said you had already taken a step toward me before I'd said anything. You acknowledged that. Why, you didn't know me. You didn't know what I needed." He considered this with the gravity he applied to most real questions. "You were standing at the edge of the room," he said, "and you were watching the exit." She stared at him. "That's it. People watch exits for 2 reasons," he said. "Because they're planning to leave, or because they're trying to remember where they are." He paused. "You had the second kind of look, like someone who had forgotten a long time ago that leaving was an option." She felt something move through her chest. Not grief. Something older than grief, the particular ache of being accurately seen by someone, which was its own kind of intimacy. "Good night, Victor," she said. "Good night, Lena." She went upstairs. She did not lie awake. The Sun-Times piece ran at 6:17 the next morning. Sandra Okafor had titled it simply her words. It was the length of a feature and the weight of a reckoning. It quoted Lena directly extensively without editorializing. It included 3 photographs from Lena's cloud account, carefully chosen, legally cleared, undeniable. It referenced the protective order and the hospital records and the pattern of control that Catherine had laid out in language so precise it could not be softened or reframed. By 9 in the morning, it had been shared 40,000 times. By noon, Derek Walsh's attorney had issued a statement calling the piece defamatory. Catherine had responded to that statement in 4 sentences that ended with the phrase, "And we welcome the opportunity to demonstrate this in court," which was attorney language for "please try it." By 3 in the afternoon, 2 women Lena had never met had contacted Catherine's office to share their own experiences with Derek Walsh. Different years, same patterns, the specific terrible consistency of a man who had learned a method and applied it reliably. Lena sat with that for a long time. She had known in the abstract that she was probably not the only one. You know these things without knowing them. When you're inside it, you feel the practice quality of certain cruelties, the fluency of someone doing something they have done before. But knowing in the abstract and hearing names, reading words written by other women who had used the same language she used because the same things had been done to them, that was different. That landed in a place the abstract couldn't reach. She called Catherine. "The 2 women," she said, "are they willing to go on record?" "One is, one isn't yet. We're giving her time." "Give her whatever she needs," Lena said. "Already doing that." She hung up and sat in the room that had been hers for 8 days and thought about the 2 women she had never met, and about the woman before her and the woman before that woman, and the specific grief of understanding that what had been done to you was not even original, that you were part of a pattern someone had been running for years on people who believed they were singular to him. Then she stopped sitting with it and picked up her phone and texted her sister. "Just wanted to tell you I love you. And I'm sorry I made you wait." Claire responded in 4 seconds. "I love you too. Come visit me when this is over. Or I'll come there. Or both. Probably both." Lena smiled, actually smiled full and unguarded at her phone screen in an empty room. It was the easiest thing she had done in years. 3 weeks later, she signed a lease on an apartment in Wicker Park, 2nd floor. 2 bedrooms, one for her, one for the office she was going to build because she had spent 8 days in Victor Salvatore's sitting room, rediscovering that she was a person who needed a room of her own in which to think, and she was not going to deprive herself of that again. The apartment had tall windows and creaking floors, and a radiator that made sounds she was already learning to find charming rather than alarming. She carried her boxes in herself. Marco appeared anyway because Victor had apparently mentioned the move date, and Marco had apparently decided that this information constituted grounds for showing up with his truck and his economy of expression and his total absence of anything requiring acknowledgement or gratitude. She let him help because it was efficient and because she had learned in the past several weeks that accepting help from people who offered it freely and without condition was not weakness. It was just sense. Victor came by once. On moving day briefly, he stood in the doorway of the new apartment with his hands in his pockets and looked around with the measured attention he gave everything and said, "Good bones." "I know," she said. "You'll be all right here," he said. "I know that too," she said. He looked at her for a moment. The gray eyes, the careful stillness, the man who had a sister he hadn't been able to save and had spent 20 years paying that debt in the only currency he had available. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it." "You did most of it," he said. And because it was Victor, she knew it wasn't a deflection. It was a precise assessment of what had actually happened, offered without ceremony. He left. She stood in the middle of her new apartment with the boxes around her and the creaking floors and the radiator beginning its first performance of the day, and she felt the particular quality of a beginning. Not the false beginning that Derek had offered her in the first months, the one built on charm and surface and the slow erosion of everything underneath. A real beginning, messy and uncertain and fully irrevocably hers. Derek Walsh in the weeks that followed did violate the protective order. Twice. Both violations were documented. Both were filed. Catherine was handling it with the same quiet, devastating efficiency she applied to everything. Frank Caruso's financial irregularities became the subject of a federal investigation that was ongoing and that had, as a byproduct, surfaced information about 3 other individuals who had been conducting a parallel campaign against Victor Salvatore's legitimate business interests. The Tribune ran a correction. Paul Whitman did not survive it professionally. Sandra Okafor's piece was nominated for a state press award. And Lena Marlowe, 29 years old, went back to work at Alderman Press on a Tuesday morning. In November, walked into the building with her laptop bag on her shoulder and her grandmother's bracelet on her wrist and sat down at her desk and opened a document she had not touched in 2 years. A manuscript she had been editing before Derek had made it difficult, and she had let him, and she read the first page. Then she picked up her red pen. She had an editor's eye and a clear head, in a room of her own, and a door with a lock whose key was on a chain that had never once been in anyone else's hands. She crossed out a sentence that wasn't working and wrote a better one in the margin, clean and certain, and entirely her own. And that was how Lena Marlowe began, again, not with a dramatic declaration, not with a final confrontation, not with anyone's permission. With a red pen and a blank margin, in the simple revolutionary act of deciding that her voice was worth putting on the page. That was enough. That was everything. That was in the end exactly what freedom looked like.